Hello everyone and welcome to this week's game development log video diary, and this week I have got a load of updates to show you. So first up this week I worked on improving the in-game menu because although I'd got all the functionality working last time, it wasn't very user friendly. So for example, the save button now gives some indication that it's been pressed, loading up a new world now shows a progress bar as it generates, and if we go to the load game screen you can see that I have completely redone this. So you've now got an overview of the save slots. When you click on a save you'll be able to see some information about that save. There's also a button to delete a save slot if you don't need it anymore. And finally, to load up a save you click on this button here, and I've also added in a loading screen for this as well. For most of this week though, I've been working on the entities, and the first thing that I wanted to do was to implement a component-based architecture. I've made a video before about component-based architectures when I was implementing one in SoccerOne, so if you want a more detailed explanation you can check out that video, but basically instead of having loads of different types of entities, you just have one entity class and add functionality to the entities in the form of components. So for example, if I wanted the trees to bounce around the world like the sheep, I wouldn't have to shift around any code or make a tree class extend a sheep class or anything crazy like that. I just add a bounce component to the tree entity, and if I go ahead and run that, you can see that the trees now bounce around happily without a care in the world. But the big new feature that I've been working on this week is the ability for the engine to render specific parts of entities in different colours, so as to add a bit more diversity into the world. Up until now, I'd just been creating and colouring my models in Blender, and then those would be the colours that were used in the game. The only way to have different colours for the same model would have been to colour the model differently in Blender and export it as a completely different model. Obviously, this doesn't allow for much diversity in the game, and I really wanted to be able to control the colours of entities from the code. My first thought was to edit the colour values of specific vertices to indicate that they should use a custom colour rather than the colour set to them in Blender. I allowed each entity to have up to 2 custom colours, and these colours could be determined and set in the code. Parts of a model that should use custom colour 1 had their vertex colour values set to -1, and parts that should use custom colour 2 were set to -2. For example, I could set the colour values for all of the vertices on the sheep's body to -1, meaning that they should use custom colour 1, and then in the code I can set custom colour 1 to whatever I want to choose the colour of the sheep's body. So here you can see me doing exactly that, with custom colour 1 being set to a random colour for each sheep. That works pretty well for the sheep, but when I did a similar thing to choose the colours of the leaves of the trees, it made them all look a little bit plain. Previously I'd been able to add some nice variation to the leaf colours, but now they were all just using whatever colour I set the custom colour to. I then had the idea of using the blue component of the colour values to indicate the brightness of the custom colour, so I could set all 3 leaf sections of the tree to use different brightnesses of the same custom colour. And in the game it was definitely an improvement, but I still felt that a little bit more variation would be nice. So in the end I decided to use the red component to determine which custom colour should be used, just like before. I then used the blue component to specify an offset that would be added to the custom colour, but this offset wouldn't have to be added to all 3 components of the colour. It could just be added to the red component, or just to the blue and green components, or just to the red and blue components. In fact, there are 8 possible combinations, so in the green component I stored an integer between 0 and 7 to indicate which components of the customizable colour the offset should be added to. So although the leaf sections all still use the same custom colour, I could now set them to use different offsets for different components of that custom colour. So in the game, if I choose the trees to have green leaves, they'll now have a nice array of different green colours. If I choose them to have brown leaves, the trees will show various shades of brown. And if I go for a more orangey red colour, I get some very nice autumny tones. So that is it for this week. All of this colour stuff that I've been working on over the last couple of weeks will be put into use when I start working a bit more on the gameplay mechanics, and I'm hoping to make a start on some of them next week. But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching this video. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Have a fantastic week, and I will see you all next time.